So these are the annotation symbols that the AP Social Studies teachers and pre-AP Social Studies teachers are going to ask students to use when they are reading text and trying to gather information from a text. You can see on the right-hand side, I've got in text in red and in margin in blue. The purpose of this video is to explain the annotation symbols and what exactly they mean, when you should use them, and how you should be writing on your text when you use them. So some of these symbols are meant to go in the text, in the actual words that you're reading on the page, and some of these symbols are meant to go in the margin, and some have a combination of the two. So I'm going to use the colors red and blue to make sure you understand which of these symbols go in the text and which of these symbols go in the margins. So the first symbol that we have is this one here for when we have a word that we don't know. When you have a word that you don't know, you are going to circle the word in the text. So you're going to circle the word in the text, and then in the margin, you will write the definition of that word. So that's the purpose of that first symbol. If you don't know a word, you're going to circle it in the text, look it up, and in the margin, you'll write the definition of that word so that you always have the definition right there next to the text in case you come back and you don't quite remember what the definition was. So you don't have to look it up again. It makes it easier for you. The next symbol is a question mark. The next symbol is a question mark, and this is going to be in the margin whenever you don't understand a sentence or a paragraph or a particular section. So you're going to write a question mark in the margin if you don't understand a general section of the reading. And that way you know that you can go and ask a friend about it or come back to your class and ask your teacher about it and make sure that you get an understanding of that word or that, not word, but sentence, paragraph, or section. The next symbol that we have is underlining text, and of course this is going to happen in the text. So you would underline text that is important. So if the author is making a claim that is very important, or if they use particular evidence that is very important, you're going to underline that text. Now be careful with underlining. A lot of students like to underline everything in a particular sentence or everything in a paragraph. That is never necessary. You only need to underline the most important words, so use that very sparingly. The next symbol that we have is when we find evidence in the text that supports the main idea. So if we find specific detailed evidence that supports the main idea, we're going to put an E outside in the margin next to that evidence so that if our teacher asks us, well, what evidence did the author use to support their claim, we just look for those E's in the margin and that directs us immediately to the evidence that we need to back up that claim. The next one is the numbers of reading questions. If your teacher has given you reading questions to answer, it's best to answer those questions after you've finished a section of reading, or at least after you've finished a whole paragraph so that you can kind of digest that information and then put it into your own words, because you always want to put it into your own words. You always want to paraphrase it to make sure that you understand it. So you would write number 1 or number 2 or whatever number the question is that it answers. So if this particular paragraph answers question 6 on your guided reading, then you'll put a number 6 in the margin so that you know when it's time to write down an answer to number 6, you're going to come back to that paragraph and you're going to find the answer to that reading question. The next one that we have here is for information that contradicts other sources that you might be reading or your prior knowledge. So if you read something and you think to yourself, well, this just doesn't sound right. This doesn't really jive with what I know about this topic or what my teacher has told me or what I've read in other books about this topic. And so if that's the case, then you would put an X in the margin next to that particular piece of information, and then you would also put a description in the margin of the other source that is being contradicted. So if, for example, you read a paragraph that says, on Mondays and Tuesdays, the sky is red all day. you know from your prior knowledge that that is not the case. It is very unlikely that the sky is ever red all day. It might be red during a sunset every once in a while, but it's not red all day. So if you read that information, you think, well, this is not right, you would put an X in the margin to indicate that this is wrong information, or at least you think it's wrong, and then you would describe the contradiction. So if I read, the sky is red all day, every Monday and Tuesday, I would put an X in the margin, and I would make a note to myself, not true. The sky is blue most days. And that indicates the contradiction. The next symbol that we have is a check mark, and this is basically the opposite of the last symbol. If you see information that corroborates other sources or corroborates your prior knowledge, then you would put a check mark and you would put a description of the corroboration. So if one source tells you that George Washington had wooden teeth, and another source also tells you that George Washington had wooden teeth, when you read the second source, you would put a check mark in the margin, and you would say, this matches what the first source told me as well. So you would describe, what other source corroborates this information in the margins. The next symbol is a happy face, and you would use this symbol if you're reminded of a personal connection. So if something has happened in your personal life that you can make a connection with this text, then you would put a smiley face in the margin. And finally, another symbol for connections that you make while you're reading. If you can think of a connection to another event or development in another time or place or theme, then you would draw parallel lines in the margin to indicate that this is a parallel. It's two events or developments that are very similar, that are happening in different times or different places. And then you would give a description of the connection in the margin. So for example, if you were reading about nonviolent protest in the civil rights movement, let's say you were reading about Martin Luther King Jr. and nonviolent demonstrations, and you've already learned in your world history class about Gandhi and how he used nonviolent demonstration in India, you might put parallel lines out next to a paragraph that describes the nonviolent demonstrations of Martin Luther King. You put those parallel lines, and then you would describe, this is just like Gandhi. These are the same strategies that Gandhi used in India. So those are the annotation symbols that we'd like you to use. And again, some of these go in the text, some of them go in the margins. Only use them if you really can make a connection, or if you really need to use them. Use them sparingly because the purpose of these symbols is for you to be able to go back into the text after you've read it and easily find the information that you're looking for.